Hello and welcome to our Soarin with Souren series. We're here with the CEO of Nexval, Mr. Souren Sarkar, the mortgage tech guru.
Thank you.
Today I want to speak a little bit about compliance, risk management, and quality control. So post-2008, risk management was at the top of the list for every company's strategic planning sessions. Why is this important, and why do we see technology making a bigger footprint in risk management?
Right, as you know, so the 2008 financial crisis really put crosshairs on the mortgage industry that we are part of. And we found a lot of holes, a lot of areas where we could have probably done a better job. But as you know, the mortgage transaction is a very complex financial transaction. Literally, the duration of a mortgage transaction can last anywhere between 2 to 30 years. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of information flowing around. And what we found was that it was not really a lack of compliance, but it was more the enforcement of the compliance. There was a lot of regulations, but there was a lot of loopholes. There was a lot of areas where there was lack of clarity. And most importantly, there was a lot of areas where we saw that the appropriate amount of audits were not being performed. So a lot of things such as stated income loans with guidelines that were not being followed were flowing through, and that caused this financial crisis to happen. So what we have realized from the financial crisis, obviously after that, the regulators went on a frenzy to create a lot more regulations for the industry, mostly for the benefit of the industry to prevent the recurrence of a financial crisis. But that brought with it the additional burden of compliance to the industry. So this is not a job that you can perform just with human intervention. The fast-changing pace of regulations and the fact that we see so much transformation in the industry every day there's a guidance, if not a new regulation coming out from one of the regulators. There has to be some level of automation to really make this a seamless process and prevent failures downstream. And that's where at Nexval we think that technology has to play a much larger role in the compliance industry, starting from identifying what are the actual risks that the mortgage bank faces, and classifying those risks into risk matrices, then mapping those risks against the compliance items that are relevant to the regulations that are coming out, and then downstream really going granular into each of these compliance items and extricating from it what are the quality checkpoints that have to be checked downstream and audited, and find what the problems are, and then do this all over again and rinse and repeat for every new change that comes to the industry. So it is quite a Herculean challenge, and without technology, unfortunately, we are doomed to failure, and we are taking the forefront of leading the charge on that.
So can you provide us with a few examples on how companies can greatly benefit from a compliance auditing system?
The human processes are inherently open to some sort of manipulation, especially if there is a conflict of interest of the operations team with the quality control team and the audit team, and there might be some internal allegiances because of which these compliance checks are being overlooked. So reduction of human intervention checkpoints. Number two, increasing the velocity and the quantity of audits that are being performed, doing it on a more real-time basis. In the 2008 financial crisis, as you mentioned, we saw that a lot of the problems were there, but they were, the audit was being performed once a quarter, once a year, and by the time we realized there's a problem, a lot of damage has been done, and various kinds of damage, reputational damage, financial damage, is done to the industry. So we need to make it more real time. We need to increase the access of these systems to the audit floor, so it's not a very cumbersome process where they have a centralized system that works as a centralized audit and checkpoint system where everybody can see that. So in our system, ARC, for example, we have a way that the head of a servicing organization can see their macro view of which are the areas where audit problems are happening, and it can drill down all the way down to a processor that can see which specific items what they're working on. For example, let's say an escrow processor made a error in escrow calculation. They would like to know about that particular escrow calculation. But head of servicing would like to know that escrow in general had more audit issues than another area.
So is it fair to say you have a boutique approach when it comes to these services as well, and compliance, not just other factors within the company? It's also boutique?
Right. Well, what we believe is that you have to set up the structure of the system from the very get-go, whether you're a small mortgage shop or a large one. And what that means is it has to be very system-driven rather than human-driven, and have the systems as an afterthought, because that is always wrapped with challenges. Because if you think about later on, then you have all of these layers in the organization, etc. So that's one of the things that we have architected in our system, is that you can use it for a very small organization or a very large one. All you have to add is more organizational structure, more departments, more people, more teams, and stuff like that. So yes, it is a boutique approach from the perspective of we're not building an enterprise class system that many of these companies cannot do. As you saw in the financial crisis, many mid-tier companies were hit first because they either could not afford, or the systems that was too cumbersome for them to implement. Most of the large banks have implemented GRC and audit systems by very, very large vendors, but those usually don't have a trickle-down effect down to the floor. And if you look at a mid-tier or a smaller organization, it is absolutely not economical and very cumbersome for them to even implement those systems. So what we are trying to do is democratize compliance and the GRC area, governance, risk and compliance and audit, across the industry, make it very accessible, and hopefully create a standardized platform that all of this data can be shared amongst all of the counterparties in the transaction.
So you mentioned audits, you mentioned other types of process management. Is there other ways to also mitigate risks? Like what other steps is Nexval taking?
That's a very good question, because as I mentioned, the volume of change in the industry is very rapid, right? So how do you keep on top of that? You might start off with going through, as we did in the beginning when we built our system, was going through every compliance manual that was relevant to us and putting it all down, and using some automated processes to extract some and some human processes to also enhance it. But thereafter, when these changes happen, to keep on top of the changes, let's say a regulation changes in a certain area, how do you keep track of that? It might just be a letter from FHA that has a mortgagee letter that mentions something, or it might be a case example of a certain case where a new precedent was formed and that needs to be captured, right? So what we have created is these natural language processing systems which go through these documents as an input, takes in a PDF or Excel document that is coming from the regulators, and then it's trying to extract from that what is the gist of it, what is the change. Unfortunately, these changes probably should be better served coming in like a standardized XML format from the regulators, but it hasn't, and many years have passed since that. We are expecting it to probably not be there in the near future. So we have to keep moving. So this automation and keeping on top of the changes is key. And then to ripple down those changes, the moment that regulation changes, then the corresponding risk matrices have to be matched up and audits have to be pushed out, and we have to do incremental changes to the system without breaking what is there. And also we need to maintain in the system what is the history. So if a change happened today and the regulator comes in and says, hey, how come you hadn't checked for it a month ago, we need to say, well, the change happened as of this date. So the historical logging and transactions of the system is super important to ensure that continuity of the process and the ability to stand up to external audits.
Regarding all of these, we keep speaking about audits and internal and quality and productivity audits. Does Nexval offer a solution to compliance audits?
Yeah, so our audits are across the board. So we have compliance audits which are looking at all of the compliance manuals that the regulators are putting out. But there are also operational audits. There are for productivity or turnaround time, etc. There are also quality audits for the actual quality of the work being produced. So it's a whole spectrum of audits can be performed through our system, and operated on by the processors on the floor. So wherever we need humans to check data, we have the manpower to do that.
So they can be customized, the audit templates?
Yes. These templates, so the system is template based, and these templates are constantly being refreshed. Many of the templates are developed in-house, but we also have a set of partners who are building templates for us, who are specialists in their particular field of compliance or audit, and those are being uploaded into the system by those third parties. So by doing that, we can now expand the scope of the system, and utilizing these templates, our customers can start off by working with an existing template, enhancing it, or starting from scratch from a template that they've built in-house, and create their own audit using those.
And real-time reports, I would imagine?
Reporting and dashboard is a key of any enterprise management system, and as I mentioned, the real-time visibility aspect is super important. So there's a whole set of reports that we have. Custom reports can also be created, and the idea is that the data, the metadata as we call it, which is the internal metrics of the quality and audit system, should be available to the customers. So not only can you actually see the operational metrics, the quality metrics, but also the internal metrics for things such as how much time did an auditor take to complete an audit, or what is the average accuracy of an auditor themselves who's checking somebody else. So we can check the checker, as they call it in the industry. And all of this is available through a series of consolidated dashboards and reports. And the idea is to give the customer full access to their data. Many of the counterpart systems in the industry have siloed data, where the data is captured by the software provider, and customers feel very frustrated that they cannot get at the data that we generate.
Silos are dead.
The silos are dead. Think about
Everyone knows that.
This is the same thing we have with social media. They own our data,
Yeah.
but we can't get to our data. So we built the platform from the ground up to counter these challenges, where you have full access to the data, either in its native raw form, where you can get a database upload, or you can run these reports and dashboards in the system.
So where do you see the future of risk management?
Well, I think it will increasingly move to more and more automation, and all the parties in the system, so the regulators, the mortgage banks, the third-party auditors, the internal auditors, the other stakeholders, shareholders, the board of directors, the compliance committee, all of these folks have to work through a centralized system where their efforts are being meshed in. Right now, they're all working in their own disparate systems, and they are really looking at the problem from different angles, and they're trying to match up their efforts using some internal reports that each group is running separately.
So it's still a fragmented approach.
It's very, very fragmented, and the only way to consolidate that is for everybody to use this one or
platform,
a couple of platforms that talk to each other, or at the least establish a common standard of communication where any new compliances are communicated in a structured fashion, and they flow down to all of the stakeholders, and the enforcement of the compliances and the regulations are also tracked through and through, so that it's very, very seamless. And in this fashion, not only can we streamline, reduce a lot of paperwork, streamline the compliance effort, but as the industry changes and we transform into looking at other forms of compliance, let's say I'm sure distributed finance and blockchain technologies will create new challenges of how to comply, how to do KYC, for example, know your customer, and these kinds of challenges. So we will be essentially be prepared for that future, but we wouldn't be able to do that if we are still fragmented in the industry. And hopefully, through our efforts and other efforts of industry consolidation, we'll be able to bring these pieces together and look at a more streamlined solution for the future.
And can you provide some additional information on how Nexval uses compliance as a service?
Right, so compliance as a service, or CAAS, is a new area that is being talked about. Essentially, it's a combination of software and people and resources, and the updating of the compliance database that is wrapped into one solution. So if you are a small mortgage bank or a medium-sized mortgage bank where you have a small compliance department or no compliance department, and you find it very, very difficult to keep up with the changes and the updates, or you're part of a large mortgage bank that needs to bounce off your compliance department's work against external experts, the compliance as a service solution works really well, where it's a single source solution where you can get all of your people, software, as well as thought leadership and update needs all in their one umbrella. And we've found great success and tremendous adoption of this solution in the industry. And we are finding that increasingly people are realizing that they can focus on their core focus of mortgage banking, whereas compliance, which is so far seen as a hurdle, can become an ally. Because if you are have a clear view of where you are compliance-wise, then you can, as a leader of these mortgage banks, you can wake up in the morning and look at more progressive things, how to take your company to the next level, than fear the knock of the next regulator on your door, and which is very, very disruptive with our mortgage partners. A regulation audit can throw everything off, and operationally and future strategic things get thrown to the back. So compliance
offering it as a service eliminates that headache for maybe the small to medium company.
Exactly. A trusted partner who can offer all of these solutions, or bring in a consortium approach where there's a lead company that brings in all of the specialists, is something that most companies looking at to augment their existing compliance infrastructure, whether they have something or not, depending on their individual circumstances.
Well, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your dedication to this industry, and really keeping us on the forefront of all the new emerging technology. And we stay focused and tuned for the next Soarin with Souren series. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.